The tale unfolds as the main character, Aryam, undergoes a sudden and dramatic shift in her life. Struck by the infamous truck Kun, she finds herself transported to a fantastical realm known as Sultura. However, this wasn't a typical teleportation that bestowed superpowers upon her. Instead, Aryam becomes entangled in a dark situation, captured by slavers who auction her off as a vampire. Despite the fantastical setting, Aryam doesn't possess any supernatural abilities, and her new reality is far from the typical hero's journey. The auctioneer sets her price at 150,000 gold pieces, labeling her as a vampire in a world where such creatures are feared. Unfortunately, no buyers show interest considering vampires to be too spooky. Ultimately, she was purchased by the House of Duke and escorted to the palace. Throughout this bewildering journey, Aryam visibly displayed her fear and confusion about the abrupt turn her life has taken. The Duke's representative warns her about the dangerous nature of Duke Millard, emphasizing that he might devour her if displeased. Expecting a ferocious beast, Aryam met Duke Millard, only to find a surprisingly pleasant guy. Curious, he asked her if she was a vampire. In her confusion, she denied it. And that's when Duke Millard's excitement turned into utter disappointment. Duke Millard, now realizing he had been scammed, was left utterly speechless. He had spent a small fortune expecting a creature of the night only to get a lowly with 0 vampire perks. Millard had a sudden brainwave and beckoned her over. As she cautiously approached, he seized her hand and the weirdo in him promptly bit it. To his horror, he realized her blood tasted like piss, and he spat it out. Aryam was left bewildered, wondering why this oddball was gnawing on her. Worry crept in as she thought Millard might just decide to end her life because her blood wasn't up to vampire standards. Meanwhile, Millard scratched his head, confused by what kind of creature Aryam could be. Not quite human, not quite vampire. Contemplating the situation, Millard pondered what to do with this enigmatic blood source. Aryam, realizing her predicament, decided her best shot at survival was to offer her services. She pleaded that she was really good at cleaning and laundry. However, Millard was having none of it, dismissively declaring he didn't need her. Frustrated, Aryam threatened to spill the beans to Duke. After some relentless pleading and negotiating, Duke reluctantly agreed to keep her on as a maid. Aryam, escorted to her room by another maid, found solace in tears, reminiscing about her family. The next morning she was greeted with a maid uniform, transforming her into the spitting image of a stereotypical maid. Baffled, Aryam wondered why, if this place hated vampires so much, they still served one. Guided to Duke's room, she was tasked with finding the missing piece of a puzzle he was working on. Miraculously, she discovered it under his bed. Now entrusted with a new mission, she had to move some books to the study room. The only hiccup, she had no idea where it was. Returning to Duke's room for guidance, a knife whizzed past her head. Duke, with a dramatic flair, pinned her against the wall, demanding to know who gave her permission to invade his space. Finding herself face to face with the imposing Duke, Aryam felt her cheeks turn into many Niagara Falls. In a panic, she stammered out an apology, prompting the Duke to summon his right-hand man, Logan. Apparently, Logan was the guy who won her at the auction for the Duke. Logan took on the role of tour guide, leading Aryam through the labyrinthine halls and rooms of the mansion. She was entrusted with the crucial task of delivering a meal to Duke Millard. As they approached Millard's table, ready to perform their culinary mission, Millard decided to change the script. He ordered Aryam to take a seat. Surprising her, Millard's keen vampire eyes spotted a bloodstain on her foot. Logan was being summoned to play escort duty to the medic. In the medical room, Aryam met Marin, who wasted no time asking about her age. Pretty suspicious behavior. As they chatted, Aryam couldn't help but notice Marin's striking resemblance to Harley Quinn from that Joker movie. Post-bandaging, Millard, in a burst of whimsy, tasked Aryam with counting the number of times the word Millard appeared in a book. She dove into the literary challenge, working her butt off and proudly presenting a grand total of 1068. Little did she know, Millard was slightly taken aback by her accuracy, triggering a nostalgic flashback. As a child, someone had locked him in a room with the same counting chore. As the days rolled on, Aryam found herself settling into the routine, though she still approached the food with caution. One night, while delivering Millard's dinner, Aryam sensed something was off. Concerned, she tried to play the caring nurse. Millard, however, brushed off her efforts, ordering her to summon someone to the flora. Confused about what the flora was, Aryam sought guidance from the other maids. To her dismay, they not only ignored her but also threw in some good old-fashioned trash-talking, fueled by jealousy over her quick bonding with Millard. Undeterred, Aryam approached the head maid and relayed Millard's requests. Still puzzled about the flora, she sought clarification from Millard, who remained characteristically unhelpful. Later that night, Millard assigned her the task of reading dates aloud, but Aryam, in a fit of mild rebellion, started complaining. The head maid barged in with important news, leading them to a room where Aryam was instructed to fetch Marin. As they walked, Marin couldn't resist letting out some jealousy-induced complaints. Together, they entered the room where Millard was, and lo and behold, a pink-haired lady looking more like a femboy was sitting on the bed. Rose introduced herself and, with a sly wink, inquired if Millard had found a partner for channeling his energy. Rose then dropped a bomb about something called a decree hearing, leaving Aryam utterly confused. Who knew vampire politics could be so confusing? So it turns out, decree was like mortal-immortal marriage with a bonus round if the mortal spouse manages to off the vampire duke. They hit the jackpot of wealth. Talk about a financial plan with a twist. Aryam, discovering this vampire matrimony hack from Rose, realized that Millard had mistaken her kindness as a ploy for a decree partnership. To clear things up, she bravely ventured into Millard's ominous room. In the shadow of Millard's dark aura, Aryam hesitated before mustering the courage to spill the tea. She clarified that she was there solely to serve him out of goodwill and had no decree ambitions. However, instead of a stern response, Millard, captivated by her lowly-esque explanation, burst into laughter. The next day at the office, Aryam decided to flaunt her creativity by crafting a paper crane. Little did she know this innocent origami attempt would backfire. Millard, eyeing the paper masterpiece, declared that she should mass-produce them. Later that day, Aryam stumbled upon the palace chapel and was in awe of its beauty. The Pope, with his majestic presence, seemed like the epitome of holiness. But alas, the initial awe faded quickly as the sermon turned into a historical reenactment class for Aryam. Yawn-inducing, to say the least, the Pope then whipped out some holy concoction in a bucket, producing a glow. Aryam, wide-eyed, couldn't believe her eyes. Summoning the attendees, the Pope invited them for a blessing. When Aryam's turn came, she chatted with him and discovered he was surprisingly friendly, though she couldn't shake the feeling that he was a tad sus. The Pope inquired about Aryam's backstory, but she skillfully dodged the question, claiming she had a date with Millard. The Pope, revealing he had the same plans, suggested they go together. Arriving at Millard's room, the Pope proposed the idea of Millard attending that time. However, Millard, acting like a bratty kid, initially declined. Instead, he opted for the more sophisticated activity of folding paper cranes with Aryam. As they sat down to make paper origamis, Aryam couldn't contain her confusion and questioned why the Pope referred to Millard as an elder. Millard revealed they were blood-related but with a significant age gap, 16 to 17 generations to be precise. One fateful night, the head maid rudely interrupted her beauty sleep, instructing her to fetch Millard from his office to the bedroom. "Oh, and there might be a dead body involved," she added with a deadpan expression, advising Aryam to act surprised. Now that's a wake-up call. Entering Millard's room, Aryam encountered the scene. Millard decked out like an overrated anime protagonist, sword in hand and a blood-stained floor. Millard, with the demeanor of Keanu Reeves, questioned her intrusion. Ignoring his inquiry, Aryam suggested a wardrobe change first as she cleaned him up. Millard, baffled by her lack of fear, questioned her nonchalant attitude. Aryam, in her signature lowly manner, explained that there were times she found him scary and times she didn't. She then smoothly shifted the conversation, asking for the lowdown on the bloodbath. The next day, as Millard lounged in his office, he noticed Ariam acting oddly and couldn't resist asking. Ariam, quick on her feet, claimed she was planning to discuss her hometown with the Pope. Surprisingly, Millard granted her permission. In the chapel, Ariam stood before the Pope. But the real star was Marin, who revealed Ariam's vampiric origins. The Pope decided to play detective. Placing his thumb on Ariam's head, a mysterious light shone upon it. Convinced by the divine glow, the Pope declared her not a vampire. The Pope dropped a bombshell, telling Ariam she was neither human nor vampire, but an empty shell. Returning to Millard's office, she told him what happened. In an oddly possessive move, Millard bit his finger and left a bloody mark on her forehead. As if that weren't quirky enough, he handed her a book titled Research on Blood Collection, the kind of book that might get you side-eyed at the library. Millard warned her it was a banned and dangerous book. Panicked, Ariam questioned why he'd give her such a thing. Millard claimed it was about vampires and urged her to give it a read. Little did she know, the book was a hot potato brought to Millard by the assassins who failed miserably at taking him down. As night fell, Logan dropped the news bomb. Count Franager, the banned book enthusiast, committed suicide, blaming Millard in the note. Ariam, now officially part of the vampire drama, tagged along with Millard to the funeral. Franager's son, however, wasn't in the mood for pleasantries, blaming everything on Millard, our gigachad. Millard, unfazed, paid his respects and dipped back at the palace ready for maid duties. The head maid pulled a classic prank. Ariam was sent on an egg-fetching mission and found herself grabbing air. Suddenly, a shadow emerged from the back door, snatched her, leaving behind a lone shoe. After that, Ariam woke up in a wooden cabin, face to face with none other than the femboy-looking man named Urian Miller. Fearful, but trying to keep her cool, Ariam listened as Urian promised to return her home if she answered some questions. Truthfully sensing her anxiety, Urian called, and his servant, who brought her there, poured hot coffee on his own head in a bizarre apology, and then ordered the poor soul's execution. Just an ordinary day, right? As Urian was about to unleash more chaos, Ariam, in an act of mercy, screamed for him to stop. This maniac's twisted smile in response hinted at an even darker side. Urian then spilled the beans on his real intentions. He wanted Ariam to enter into a decree with Millard to sweeten the deal. He dangled a hefty price tag for her cooperation. However, even in the midst of the chaos, Ariam could see through Urian's slimy facade. Back in the Duke's office, Millard was playing detective with the head maid, extracting every bit of information about Ariam's connection to the head king. Ariam stood her ground against Urian's decree proposal, bluntly telling him she had zero intentions of getting cozy with Millard in any form of matrimonial venture. Urian, surprisingly chill about it, thanked her for the honesty and graciously allowed her to make a swift exit. Taking a carriage straight to the palace, Ariam couldn't help but fret over what the Duke might think of her sudden disappearance. Gathering her courage, she ventured to Millard's room only to witness him in a state of sheer desperation, bursting out of the door like a bat out of hell. Ariam, overwhelmed, began pouring her heart out about the cabin ordeal, but in a moment of brick-induced impulsivity, Millard planted a kiss on her. The unexpected lip lock left Ariam in a daze, and Millard, seizing the moment, scooped her up and brought her inside. Inside the room, Ariam spilled the beans about the head maid's shady role, urging Millard to give her the boot. However, Millard, in a classic boss move, defended the head maid's job performance. Ariam, confused, asked why he didn't come to her rescue. At the cabin, Millard left her to connect the dots herself. Closing the curtains for some added dramatic flair, Millard embarked on an exposition journey. He told Ariam about the imperial family's plot to make him mortal through a human-vampire union. The catch? The imperial family had a murderous vendetta against his potential wives, and he couldn't just find a vampire bride in the realm. He ruled wide-eyed, learned the shocking truth. Whoever became Millard's wife would have a target on their back from day one. Now, the second prince had decided to play the sugar daddy card with Ariam. Next thing she knew, he sent her a pair of shoes. However, when she ventured into Millard's room ready for the inevitable interrogation, he surprised her by not getting mad at all. Instead, he casually told her to use the gift and any other fabulous products she received. Just when Aryam thought the gift saga was over, the second prince struck again, gifting her an apron. This time, Millard didn't reciprocate. To smooth things over, Aryam decided to apologize. With a touch of flower power, she got Millard some flowers and attached a note filled with sweet sentiments about the value of his gifts. However, instead of receiving gratitude, she got a cold dismissal. Confused by the abrupt reaction, Aryam left the room, leaving Millard alone with his newfound flower fragrance obsession. Aryam found herself accused of breaking a glass vase by an irate maid. Aryam, innocent as a kitten, protested her innocence, but the maid wasn't buying it. With a sigh, Aryam agreed to clean up the mess. Just another day in the vampire mansion. In a cinematic flashback, Millard reminisced about creating the blue teapot himself. Why? Because he enjoyed the taste of poison, and being a vampire, it didn't bother him. Just your average vampire with a weird palate. As Aryam scurried to find the bead box, she crossed paths with the mad maid from before, who accused her of snitching to the Duke. Aryam, baffled, denied the allegations. But before she could protest further, the maid locked her out in the cold confines of the bathing area. A maid named Isabel helped Aryam out and escorted her to her room. She then informed the Duke about it. He was pretty angry. Hearing that, he then went to Aryam's room to see her. Millard decided to show a softer side when Aryam fell ill. In a moment of rare seriousness, Millard apologized to Aryam, promising to change his ways. Apparently, he realized he hadn't been the most careful caretaker, and Aryam's condition was proof of that. Just when things seemed to be taking a turn for the wholesome, the holy light enthusiast made his entrance. Ordered by Millard to fix Aryam, the Pope, with all the knowledge of her past life and emptiness, hesitated before applying his holy touch to her forehead. Millard, unimpressed, found the whole blessing affair annoying, and the Pope eventually made his exit. Aryam, curious about Millard's displeasure, asked for an explanation, but he brushed her off, sending her off to sleep. The Duke then went to Aryam's room and told her that he would change her room because her current one was too far away. He modified many things about the palace for her. Waking up in her new and improved room, Aryam marveled at the cozy comfort surrounding her. Even the vampire room was conveniently close, as if the entire mansion had undergone a magical makeover. The once jealous and mad maids now bowed to Aryam's newfound authority, creating a strangely harmonious atmosphere. Heading towards Duke Millard's office, Aryam overheard two maids discussing their reluctance to bait the vampire lord, as he was apparently acting like a monster. Well, vampire problems, right? Inside the office, Millard orchestrated a grand sit-down session, leaving Aryam twiddling her thumbs for what felt like hours. Later that night, Millard called Aryam outside his room and presented her with the chocolates. Before your imagination runs wild, let me clarify. They were delicious chocolates. Aryam graciously thanked the Duke, but something seemed off. Millard's face was downcast, leaving Aryam in a state of perplexed, chocolatey confusion. He needed Flora as he was hungry. They all freaked out and hastily grabbed another girl instead of Flora. For Flora, the blood-sucking gig, the poor girl they picked was terrified. So Aryam decided to be the peace ambassador and clear up her confusion. Aryam, with a mental eye roll, headed to the Duke's lair. On the way, she couldn't shake off the feeling that the new girl was a mini-her when she first landed in this peculiar palace. When she finally reached the Duke's office, she revealed about the new recruit for Flora. Now Duke, in all his blood-sucking glory, sauntered over to check out the new girl. However, he couldn't quite read Aryam's expression. Confusion struck him like a lightning bolt, and he got all anxious, feeling like he messed something up. As Duke approached the sobbing girl, something snapped inside him, and he ended up squeezing her neck a bit too hard. Oops! Realization hit him like a ton of bricks, and he stepped back, regret washing over his vampire conscience. Seeking redemption, he asked the girl about human-like gestures to do something nice for Aryam. The girl, still sniffling, suggested a raise or some cold, hard cash. As she rambled on, Duke's super-sensitive vampire nose caught a whiff of blood. Outside the room, Aryam's patience was wearing thin. She envisioned the worst and, fueled by memories of her own entry into this bizarre palace, pulled out a dagger, giving her finger a little paper cut for dramatic effect. Just as she was ready to superhero her way into the room, Duke intercepted her. He realized she thought he was turning the girl into a snack, and his delicate femboy ego took a hit. Aryam assured him it was just a déjà vu moment, and the Duke, looking slightly wounded, retreated into his lair. That night, like a mysterious nocturnal creature, he vanished into the forest without a word. Well, you see, Millard, the Duke of Brooding, wasn't really a sissy femboy, but more like a lonely vampire with a serious case of the blues. His childhood was basically a vampire version of being grounded forever. The next day, Irene strolled into her room, expecting to find Millard, but he was nowhere in sight. A whole week went by, and still no sign of the elusive Duke. Puzzled, she lounged on her bed, wondering where on earth the Duke had vanished to and what kind of shenanigans he was up to. Just as her thoughts were spiraling into a worry-fueled daydream, there was a knock on her door. Lo and behold, it was the Duke himself. Before Uriam could even process his presence, he gave her head all. "Got you dirty." "Dirty?" "Not that type of head." He presented her with the severed head of the slave trader who had captured her. Duke then told her that he had single-handedly cleared out the entire slave trader market and liberated Uriam. Instead of jumping for joy, Uriam was still processing the information, but Duke misread her expression. Thinking she was disappointed, Duke transformed into a full-blown simp, desperately asking her how he could make her happy. In a fit of anxiety, Duke broke down, even going as far as kneeling in front of her, begging for forgiveness. Uriam, surprised by the dramatics, picked him up. But Duke continued to plead, convinced she saw him as a monster. The next morning, Millard dived first into a mountain of letters like a paper-hungry detective on a mission. Uriam, his trusty sidekick in the noble art of dustbin duty, stood by his side. As Millard sifted through the stack, he spotted the prestigious Eck Miller invitation letter, gave it a casual nod, and expertly tossed it into the not-interested pile. Uriam, now promoted from garbage lady to chief name, Cutter took on her new role with a determined flourish. Later that night, a grateful Uriam thanked Millard for liberating the slaves, sharing that it reminded her of her own captivity. Millard suddenly connected the dots. He realized that when Uriam spoke of her initial day in that world, she meant the day she got caught by slavers in a moment of delusional glory. Millard asked if she wanted to go back home. Ariam, with a dose of reality, explained that going back wasn't in the cards for her. Millard breathed a sigh of relief, interpreting her words as a sign of affection. The next morning, Duke sat in his office looking like a corporate slave burning the midnight oil. Uriam, stationed comfortably on a couch, couldn't help but notice his pale demeanor. Being the inquisitive soul he was, he decided to dive into the mysteries of Uriam's past life, asking about her academic endeavors. Uriam revealed she was once a shining academic star with dreams of becoming a civil servant. Millard, looking like he just discovered a parallel universe, was shocked at her studious past and immediately began comparing her to the students in his world. He summoned Julio Almaz, the librarian advisor, to be Uriam's academic mentor. The studying journey began in the afternoon, and Uriam couldn't help but feel a bit out of her element. Meanwhile, at the maid mess, the head maid burst in with a grand function on the horizon, and all servants could pen down their requests for wages or bonuses. Cheers erupted from the staff, but Uriam, in a rare moment of worry, realized she couldn't navigate the festivities alone. Off to Isabel she went, requesting her company for the upcoming shenanigans. A visit to Duke's office ensued, but Millard was deep in a bad mood. Uriam, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in his corporate slave heart, shared her festival plans with Isabel, only to unintentionally exacerbate Millard's already grumpy state. The next day, with all servant requests completed, Millard made a dramatic exit from the palace. A curious servant asked Aryam why she wasn't joining him for the parade. Baffled but eager for adventure, she decided to ditch the office and hit the festival with Isabel. At the lively festival, Uriam decided to go incognito, sporting a hat to keep her black locks and identity under wraps. Meanwhile, over at the Emperor's palace, Duke Ek Miller encountered the formidable presence of Duke. However, Duke's mood wasn't exactly festive as he brooded over the idea of Uriam enjoying herself without him. Logan, ever the voice of reason, advised Duke against making a scene. Duke, caught in the whirlwind of thoughts about a mere maid, found himself in a tangle of emotions. Enter the femboy prince, ready to apologize but equally ready to stir the pot. Inquiring about Uriam, Duke grumpily asserted that the prince had no business knowing about her. The prince, observing this, realized his plan to pique Duke's interest in Uriam was working like a charm back at the function. As the parade finally kicked off, Duke found himself holding a leash with the headmaid on the other end, the center of attention for the parade. The headmaid took the spotlight. During the parade, the crowd erupted in cheers, leaving Duke in the dust like "My crush neglects me." The parade itself was a dazzling spectacle, and the entire audience soaked up the enjoyment. Once the glitter settled, everyone returned to their usual festival shenanigans. On the way back, Uriam couldn't help but inquire about the headmaid's strange position with Duke. Isabel spilled the beans, revealing that she was initially Duke's chosen companion because, well, there wasn't anyone else around. Isabel clarified that sitting on a horse with a woman beside you symbolized obedience, and she dropped the bomb that she was Duke's initial pick. They took a breather at a fried chicken stall, where Isabel casually suggested Uriam could be the priestess in the parade. Uriam, not feeling the whole horseback obedience vibe, questioned the term priestess. Isabel, in her typical straightforward style, recounted a scandalous tale of a viscount who accidentally brought his side piece instead of his fiancée to the parade. The woman on the horse became the equivalent of soul, if young, and a priestess, if old. Uriam had missed the chance to be the youthful soul equivalent. Opportunity knocked, but she didn't answer. Isabel then revealed that she was paid to be friendly to advise her to sing her praises in front of the Duke. They wrapped up the function with more enjoyment and headed back to the palace. Millard, returning and still fuming over his encounter with the princess, fretted about whether Uriam cared about the medal he received. In a surprise twist, he decided to check on her in her room, only to be greeted by Uriam like it was his birthday surprise. The grumpy old grandpa Duke didn't seem impressed at all with Ariam's excitement. He brushed off her enthusiasm, telling her not to force herself into these things. Ariam, determined to make her point, retorted that she wasn't forcing herself. She genuinely wanted to do it. Sensing his displeasure, she quickly apologized and suggested she should leave. Just as she was about to make her exit, Duke halted her with a gruff voice, instructing her to light the candles and share the tales of her day. Reluctantly, they both settled down and Uriam revealed every detail as she narrated. Duke, in his own gruff way, asked if she had fun. She beamed and replied, "It was awesome. Tons of fun." Suddenly, Duke sprang from his chair and fetched a sky lantern from another room. He suggested they send it together. They ascended to the terrace, lit it up, and watched it float into the night sky. Uriam couldn't help but feel genuinely happy, and it dawned on Millard that, grumpy as he may be, he had managed to bring joy to her day.
Love the manhwa? Subscribe for more. Your support makes it all possible. Hit subscribe now!